So the big question, is it possible to know or understand the roller coaster of male-female dynamics and the exchange of masculine and feminine energy within ourselves and each other? So the big answer is yes. You can even learn to enjoy the game, know yourself better, like yourself better, and know, like, and understand the opposite sex better as well. I'm going to be teaching this course on Vedic astrology and the royal code. Men, women, planets, genders, shadows, projections, all of it on December 23rd and 30th, 2023. I'll be teaching that live. Of course, the recordings are available into perpetuity. But as you can see, there's a lot that I'm going to be covering here based on classical Vedic teachings, that's Vedic astrological teachings, as well as Indian teachings that include male-female dynamics that are seen in yoga and tantra and relationship compatibility. Thousands of years the Indians have been dialing this stuff in. There's also some classical psychological, particularly like Jungian archetypal models that will be employed. As much as you see so much Jungian being applied to astrology, I'm kind of going in the reverse here. Again, these are very powerful archetypes and concepts that can really help you also understand how we learn and express our lived experience as a gendered being through things like anima and animus, which is the inner male and female, shadows, which are the dark unintegrated parts, as you see here, unintegrated and confused. The female has unintegrated and confused sun energy. The male has unintegrated or confused moon energy. I'll go through each of the 7 planets, the 3 male, 2 female, and the 2 neutral planets, Mercury and Saturn, and explain them through this dynamic. I'm also going to explain things like the projection, where we project the anima and animus, the shadow, onto others. Also things like narcissist, empath, which is also part of a sort of polarization and shadowy projection. These are all Jungian, but also there are modern relationship gurus and coaches and models that are also going to be deployed, particularly those of Alison Armstrong, who is a modern relationship teacher that I really like. She wrote a book called The Queen's Code, which taps into historical archetypes of a male's evolution from knight, prince to king, the female evolution from damsel to princess to queen. You can see how these match up: knight and damsel, prince, princess, king, queen. I'm going to get into some very deep models of how, through my 20 years of relationship research and practice, I've seen these things play out in real time with real people that pay me money to know what I'm talking about and take my classes and take my courses. I've looked at thousands and thousands and thousands of charts over the years and done case studies where I explain these things to people with deadly accuracy by looking at their chart. It's not just astrology, it's also understanding these masculine, feminine dynamics. Like, for example, which part of the female evolution is related to the damsel, the princess, and the queen? And how does she project that onto the male, regardless of whatever stage he's at? For example, if she's a princess, she's going to be projecting a princess onto the male. So if he's at a prince stage, that'll be a good match. If he's at a king stage, she's going to be still seeing him as a prince, even though he's a king, so she's going to miss. In fact, if she's a princess, though, and he's still at the knight stage, she's going to recognize that. So there's going to be some very important things you're going to understand, that once we evolve to a certain point in our own consciousness, just like everything else, we can then see the lower vibrations of consciousness in ourselves and in others. So we're going to get into some very deep models around these things, how all the planets evolve in you from these unintegrated masculine and feminine to how we project it onto the other and whatnot. So again, this is going to be fantastic. On these 2 successive Saturdays, December 23rd and December 30th, 2023, I'll be teaching these male-female dynamics through the lens of Vedic astrology and the archetypes of Indian philosophy. And that also includes things like the concept that women should have the higher mentality and men should have the higher conduct. Again, this is shown in classical Vedic Kuta matching. Again, the principle is shown there. It shows that the shortest circuit and distance should be from the man to the woman, not the reverse. Again, this is also a principle that's shown in Indian philosophy and dynamics that goes into horoscope matching and, again, things like masculine and feminine archetypes in structures like Tantra and yoga and whatnot. Energy flows from masculine to feminine, evoking the masculine tendency to assert and the feminine capacity to be receptive, empowered through action and confidence with the masculine, and empowered through receptivity with the feminine. But these are deep challenges, and you may think, oh, we've evolved, we're more sophisticated than that now. This is all outdated. You're saying that from your perspective. You're not saying it from my perspective, who has been doing relationship astrology for 20 years, looking at hundreds of charts every year. So before you start dismissing this, realize you're listening to someone who doesn't have the same experiences that you do. Maybe you've been researching this, but you haven't gotten down in the trenches like I have, for one thing, not to mention the fact that I've taught many, many courses on this stuff and had very, very smart people reflect back to me like, wow, that's some of the best relationship teaching I've ever heard. Not just because of me. I'm teaching just the Indian classical models, but I am interpreting them for the modern world. And that's just me with Vedic astrology and my teachings. I'm going to be taking this much further and extending this, especially bringing in more of the modern psychological and Jungian models, such as, again, the anima and animus. What's really going on psychologically with us? This is where these things can be very important to contextualizing the Indian teachings. We have an inner masculine and inner feminine, and from that we project onto the other, right? But there's a lot of shadows in this sort of projection. And again, it creates a lot of polarization. We kind of split off into these polarized, dark parts of our consciousness that are unintegrated. Now, again, it's a very kind of Jungian and Western psychological way of seeing our relationships and our dynamics and trying to integrate the masculine and the feminine, because underneath it all, your soul is neither gender. You've incarnated in this body with karma, and it's the karma of the gender that you're playing out. So again, this is also a much larger container. Again, as much as I find the Jungian models and psychological models useful, they're quite limited because they do not contain that larger context as the source. That's been my experience. So again, also the lens of some traditional yet cutting-edge relationship teachers and coaching, like Alison Armstrong, and there's some other things that I'm going to bring out with her that you may now have heard before, things like relationship models, ways that we can, ways that we all get into these habits of not understanding the other person's motivation. So there's going to be an enormous amount, whether you're a man or a woman. Again, women, you're going to really understand male psychology in a very deep way. You're also going to understand female psychology in a very deep way relative to these classical structures, this evolution of damsel, princess, queen. And by the way, it's not just happening within a woman, it's happening within a man too. The inner anima of the man is also evolving damsel, princess, queen. This isn't necessarily part of anything you've heard before, I know, because I've looked. And the woman, her animus, did I say them right? Yeah, is evolving the inner knight, prince, king as well. So these archetypes are evolving subconsciously and consciously at the same time through all the projections. So again, it's quite intense. And it's also going to be an adult-themed class where we're going to get into things like sexuality and what happens once we start having sex. How and why sex changes everything. It opens everything up. As it says, it's all just a game. And then the game changes. Once we have sex, now we're playing a different game. Before we were playing a certain game where we were showing, okay, now we're playing a different game. And now the game gets more serious, but it's often not so fun. So again, through the lens of my 20 years of doing relationship consultations, teaching a masterclass on male-female dynamics, all with great success. I've been doing this a long time, and people really like these. And by the way, if you've taken some of my classes before where I've done the relationship 80-20 fast track or stellar relationships or other things, this is a totally different course. Okay? It's much deeper. It's not about how to read relationship charts. It's not about doing relationship astrology readings and all of that. That's not what it is. So you want to know right up front. I'm talking about these things here. I'm not talking about how you want to look for the man's moon and the woman's Venus or whatever. I'm not looking at that. That'll be a little bit. That'll show some of the indicators, but I'm actually talking about what I have here. I'm going to be explaining in great depth, whether you're into astrology or not, masculine, feminine dynamics. Astrological archetypes are and astrological energies are always going to explain these things better than anything else, because they are the powers that explain everything, not just relationships. They explain everything if you understand them. Of course, a big part of life is gender, is planets rule genders. There's also elements connected to gender. So the concept of masculine and feminine interacting is universal. There's a sun and a moon. So astrology is the best system to explain pretty much anything. But we're going to extend that to other great relationship models and dynamics that are at our disposal now. I'm going to be bringing all those things together. So as it says here, you're quite a mess, aren't you? Let's face it, you probably have no clue what you're doing. You barely have a clue why you're doing anything as it relates to the opposite sex. And even with the things you are clued into, you feel powerless to change any of your behavior. So yes, it's complicated, but it's not that hard. Complicated, but it's not that hard. Relationship dynamics have been studied for thousands of years. All of it is known and understood through Vedic astrology, the planets. Modern psychological models humanize and contextualize the feelings and the dynamics brilliantly. But they're extremely limited and can just be one more New Age narcissistic trap of endless emotional over-analysis that eventually leads nowhere except back to its same indulgent state. And this is what I was saying before about some of the, if we just rely only on like Jungian analysis, it's just this loop. It's like this revolving door of back into the stories, back into this. Let's analyze my emotions more, analyze them more. It can just be this kind of New Age loop. So again, but they're very helpful in understanding our psychological motivations. So integrating the dharmic classical dynamics of like Vedic astrology, Vedic teachings, with the modern psychological models, with decades of real-world client experience, which is what I bring, is what the course will give you. So again, I've been teaching and studying relationship dynamics with hundreds of paid clients, seeking my advice for close to 2 decades. I wrote a book on this subject in 2010 called Stellar Relationships that I've never published, frankly, because some of it was too controversial and graphic. But I will be teaching some of these themes in the upcoming course. Not graphic, X-rated, but I did get into deeper themes, even around sex, sexuality and other things. And I didn't want to put that out. I'm still hesitant now because these things can be very misunderstood. And again, I am going to be bringing out some of those concepts, though, that you can hear. December 23rd and 30th with a bonus class on December 16th. So again, in this course, Vedic astrology and the royal code, and by the way, I talk about it like this because in the astrology text, it also tells you the sun is the king, moon is the queen, Mars is the general, Jupiter is basically kind of like the knight in shining armor, Venus is the lover, right? Mercury and Saturn are the neutral energies. So this is one way to also understand it. There's the 3 gendered planets, the masculine and the feminine. So when you want to understand the progression from knight, prince, king, you can understand the 3 masculine planets. Feminine planets are different. There's only 2, but you could still see the progression of damsel, princess, and queen in a much more fluid way just between the moon and Venus. And also those unintegrated concepts in the man as he projects onto the woman, and the unintegrated masculine knight, prince, king from the woman onto the man. So again, this is a very deep thing. So we're going to be looking at this, and I call it Vedic astrology and the royal code because the royal code is actually in the text as well. They give you all of this, these frameworks for understanding masculine and feminine dynamics, if you know that's what you're looking at. So a few of these bullets that I wrote: what to do if you're a modern strong woman having a hard time finding men who are not looking for a mommy. Sound familiar? What are you doing to create this dynamic specifically? Well, I'll tell you right now, it's a 4-letter word that begins with F, and it's fear. But what are you so afraid of? What to do if you're an evolved, sensitive man having a hard time being respected for your feelings or your goals? Are you obsessed with that one woman you're ready to die for? You're also being driven by your fears. What are you going to do about it now? Again, overly sensitive man in this way. What are you going to do now? Because not supposed to be just stuck like that. What are the exact stages, games, and delusions of women as they evolve through the damsel, princess, queen archetype? How can you play this game better and to win? Can you really be all things to all people? Well, actually, yes, you can, but you have to know what you're doing and why. You'll have to know where your true power lies. What is the true power of feminine energy? What is it? Because the damsel, princess, queen is just how the divine feminine is evolving. What are the exact stages, games, and delusions of men as they evolve through the knight, prince, king archetype? Men, these definite and clear stages of life can only be understood in relation to women, as it's for them you are growing. So how can you keep from losing yourself in their approval? So it's important. Ladies, this is also important for you to know as well, so you can stop infantilizing men, then blaming them for it later, saying they want a mommy, or calling them a narcissist when they refuse to be infantilized. Right? The number one mistake both men and women make when they first meet, which all but guarantees we will be with the wrong person. This awful mistake is so deeply buried, hidden, and subconscious that I almost guarantee you have no idea you are doing it now, have been doing it your whole life, and even though I'm going to tell you what it is, it will be almost impossible for you to not keep doing it. Sounds fun, huh? This mistake is so deeply hardwired that we almost have to go against our natural instinct to overcome its hypnotic power. We're all making it. And even when I tell you what it is, you'll have a hard time not continuing to make it. The number one secret men must understand about women when they first meet them. Women are definitely a mystery to men, but understanding that this one thing is the most important thing if men ever want to understand why women are doing what they're doing, particularly at first. Of course, it's also important for women to understand this one motivation. Most women do not understand this motivation themselves either. You know, sometimes people think I'm really arrogant when I say this stuff, but you don't have the experience I have. I do nothing but talk to people about their nature and how unconscious we are about, oh, this is why I've been doing this for decades and am completely delusional about what I want now, where I am, and how I'm going to get it, thinking somehow it's going to magically happen. Again, whether it's man or woman. And then I got to say, but don't you understand, this is why you've been doing this. Because this is your motivation, just as a woman. And they're like, wow, you're right. I mean, it's basic, but it's something these things are so deeply hardwired we don't even see them. Like the fish who is in water who says, what water? It's like you're breathing air. But if I say, look at the air you're breathing, you're like, what do you mean air? There's no air. It's nothing but air. These things I'm talking about are so deeply hardwired. I don't mean to sound... Sometimes people get mad at me because they're like, you sound so, like you're condemning everybody. Like everybody's so stupid and you're the only one who's smart. I don't mean to come off like that. But the most important things that move the needle the most are things that most of us are like 100% unconscious to. And when you're reminded, you're like, oh, wow, how did I miss this my whole life? How did I not see that that's actually how I'm motivated? Because again, we're up here playing these games. We don't even understand that the games are being played on the board, like the chess board or the board we're playing the game. It's like we don't even know we're playing a game. Our games are so ingrained and so instinctive and so unconscious, we don't even know we're doing it. So that's what awakening to these things are. And the last one, the number one secret women must understand about men, that is non-negotiable if he is to be the empowered figure you want. Women want men to be this empowered figure. It is 100% non-negotiable trait for a man to stay with a woman long term. He will not. I said long term, as he will stay with you for a while, trying to endure this indignity, but after a while he will leave and seek it elsewhere. If you don't know this, you're driving him into the arms of other women, guaranteed. It is only a matter of time. And again, men, I have to remind men of this. So it's not sexist here. I have to tell men, this is why you're doing this. And this is what you need to understand about yourself. This is the one thing you need to understand about yourself. So again, it's not just that women don't understand about men, they don't understand it either, or else they wouldn't allow it to happen. Just like with women, if you understood this was your motivation, you wouldn't, well, I said you wouldn't allow it to happen. This goes back to these hardwired mistakes. These mistakes that are so hardwired, even when I tell you these things, you're going to still want to do it because it's so deeply instinctive and hardwired. So again, this is only the beginning. So again, it's impossible to develop personally without understanding your identity as a man, woman, or whatever flavor of gender you embody in this lifetime. And by the way, that's also important. You're thinking, oh, things are more complicated now, they're more fluid. What about trans? What about gay? What about this? It's all still the same thing. It's variations on the same theme of gender. In many ways, gender identity and sexuality is perhaps the most important identity factor in any incarnation. Besides being a human, you are a human female or a human male. It's automatically built into your nature. So more details, for example, even though biologically and chemically you're only about maybe 51% male, 49% female, or vice versa, as a matter of identity, you feel 100% female, 100% male. So the conundrum is quite deep. Again, even though I have a lot of my, my feminine energy and whatnot, on a certain level, I'm like 100% male. I don't feel any, I'm like totally like, oh yeah, a woman, I'm a man, I'm this. It's like, but it creates this skewed perspective because on a soul level, there is no gender. On a karmic level, I'm barely a man energetically, but in my identity, or I should say biologically, but energetically and through my identity, it's like 100%. So it's like this strange conundrum. That's why like half of my psychology is tied up in this psyche toward the, I forget if it's anima or animus. I'm sorry, correct me. This is my bipolar dyslexia. I can't remember which one is what. I think anima is man, animus is female, but I could be wrong. But this is what it is. Like half of our mind is caught up in trying to reconcile this conundrum. Even though we have almost an equal mixture of both masculine and feminine energy within us, we identify almost 100% with only half of that nature. So again, modern psychology, Jungian archetypes describe this as the inner man, inner woman, the anima and animus. We project these unintegrated subconscious images of our opposite onto the objects of our affection. Something about that opposite feels like it will complete us inside. But it's mixed with a lot of crazed and deranged emotions that are not within our control or conscious field. Again, this is exploding subconscious, unintegrated energy. Like I'm going to go through in the course, you see this thing here where I have, integrated, unintegrated. I'm going to go through all the planets this way and show the ones that are integrated, the ones that are unintegrated. But again, Vedic astrology is particularly astute at bringing together the aspects of masculine energy, shown by the 3 masculine planets, and the feminine energy shown by the 2 feminine planets. So when we analyze these forces as both conscious and integrated forces, as well as unconscious and unintegrated forces, then a deep karmic and psychological map reveals itself of the anima, the animus, as a beginning point and as an archetypal place connected also to, knight, prince, king, damsel, princess, queen, and all of the polarizing around that. Even beyond gendered planets, we have the neutral planets of Mercury and Saturn. They're also very important. They're outside of the spectrum of charged sexuality. Mercury is like the young and playful child, prepubescent, right? Before you got into all that, there was just Mercury, which is like, what is this? I'm trying to understand this. Not charged up either way. And then Saturn is like the older, mature energy, which has passed through the passions and fires of attraction, etc. So again, you have those charged planets, but then you also have the 2 neutral ones. Mercury is just kind of not charged up around gender or anything else. It's just trying to understand it. And Saturn is like, all right, I've been through all that, and I can look back and see this thing now with more neutrality. So analyzing these factors together, as well as bringing in modern relationship dynamics from great teachers like Alison Armstrong and other teachers, including myself, who has been working with these relationship dynamics for 20 years, will be a fun ride. You'll not find this type of hybrid teaching anywhere else. I guarantee that. And again, it's not going to be do relationship astrology where we pull up all these charts and you see the compatibility between this person and that person. It's going to be on these models, which is enough. People write entire books and long courses and whatnot on these things, and they don't have half of the dharmic structures and proper teachings in place to be doing so. And I mean that intentionally. I'm going to be talking about these things that are so ubiquitous in our life. Our masculine, feminine charges, genders, unconsciousness, projection. It doesn't have to be just with romantic relationships. If you want to understand the women in your life, you want to understand the men in your life, and understand what really makes them tick, because you probably don't. You might think you do, but again, I'm not talking about that specific one and, oh, he's so this or that. You probably don't even understand what motivates him. And with our women, you probably don't even understand, or, with men, probably don't understand what really even motivates this person you love so much. What really motivates her? Do you care? Do you really want to know? This could be invaluable. And by the way, do you know yourself? Like I just said, most of the time, hardly anyone knows any of this, even about themselves, which is probably the most important thing. Women, you should know this about yourself first. Before you start trying to do something before you start projecting, you should understand first, because again, even the source of all your projections is going to start with your level of gender integrity first. You're going to project from where you are first. So the more confused you are about you as a woman or you as a man, and wherever you are relative to that evolution, you're going to project that onto the other person, like I said at the beginning. You could be a king and have gone through a lot of these stages. And by the way, I'm going to also explain in great detail each of these stages. They are very specific. And again, those of you who say, oh, that's outdated. Oh, we're more complicated. Oh, we're this or that. Again, you haven't done what I've done. And maybe you don't believe it, so the course isn't for you. But for most people, you haven't done a couple hundred readings for a couple decades, studied this stuff, taught it over and over. And again, when you teach it, I teach this stuff to smart people, and I get their questions, comments, complaints, criticisms, concerns. Oh, that's not right. That's not right. I'll sit there and stand in the fire and answer their questions. I've heard them all, believe me. So when people say, oh, that's not real, you're making it too simple, oh, that stuff's outdated, you're just saying this based on your opinions, which probably aren't based on anything like what I've done. And you're free to check it out, by the way, also. Right? But the thing to understand is that first, we need to know ourselves first. So a man whose connection to his own masculine, however weak or in deficit that is, that's what he's going to project onto the female. He's going to project her level as his level. So again, let's say the man who is at this stage of his development, let's say he's in between he's like in between the prince and the king. This is where a lot of us hang out, or in between the princess and the queen. Once we get to be a prince, a lot of times we think we're the king still. But we're not the king yet, because the king has dominion. Again, I'm going to explain these things, but he's going to project, wherever he is, he's going to project that onto her. Or he's going to be trying to project up. So you feel comfortable with where you are, you feel a little bit above what's underneath of you, and you feel intimidated by what's above you. So the prince, if he thinks he's in the presence of a queen, he's going to be a little intimidated and trying to impress the queen. If she's actually a queen, she's going to see through that because she's at a higher stage. She's at the queen stage. She's used to seeing princes, and she's looking for a king. Now, again, she might think she's a queen, but she's actually a princess. And a king shows up who is doing the same kinds of things that it looks like a prince is doing, but if she's only at the queen stage, if she's only at the princess stage, she's going to project that, oh, this is another prince, when actually it could be a king. She's not going to recognize a king yet because she hasn't passed through that stage yet herself. Same is true with the male and female. These are the kinds of things we're going to get into, what exactly it looks like, and how exactly we are doing and projecting these anima, animus, shadow projection. Again, it's all, I'm going to bring all this together, all these archetypes together. Specifics of what the projection is, specifics of what the knight, prince, king, damsel, princess, queen looks like, acts like, both in the person and in the opposite. Right? So it'll be fun. So come check this out, and sure you really like it. I do have a few bonuses as well that I'm going to put. I just put this page together. There will be some bonuses that will also make it really worthwhile. So I'm looking forward to doing this.